You know, in the entire history of Harlem's underworld, there's this one name that usually gets passed over, seen as just a footnote in a much more famous man's story. But the thing is, he was a legend in his own right, a man who ruled with a weapon way sharper than any blade or bullet. This is the story of West Indian Archie.
I mean, we're talking about a guy who could hold an entire financial empire inside his head. No paper, no receipts, just perfect, total recall. And in a world that was absolutely defined by violence, his power came from his intellect. His reputation? That was his muscle. And his memory? Well, that was his weapon.
He was a kingpin, a mentor, a rival, and when you get right down to it, a symbol of a whole forgotten era. So yeah, it's time to pull his story out of the shadows.
So let's get beyond that famous feud with Malcolm X for a minute. Who was the man known as West Indian Archie, really? And how in the world did he earn a title like Harlem's human computer?
To really get a grip on who this man was, you have to understand the world that created him. We're talking about Harlem in the 1930s and 40s, a place just buzzing with incredible energy, creativity, and, well, a whole lot of desperation.
You see, there were really two Harlems back then. You had the Harlem of the Renaissance, the one the whole world knows, right? Full of jazz clubs, poets, artists. But just behind all that glamour was the harsh reality for most people, crushing poverty and very, very few legitimate jobs. In that world, hustling wasn't a choice, it was an economic lifeline.
And at the very heart of that lifeline was something called the numbers game. Just think of it like a street-level lottery. It was cheap to play, it offered a massive payoff, and here's the most important part. It was run by and for the community. This wasn't some outside operation. It was a black-controlled business that employed thousands.
Now this is the world where a man like West Indian Archie could thrive. See, he wasn't the toughest guy on the block or the flashiest. He rose to the top for one simple reason. He was, without a doubt, the smartest man in any room he walked into.
While other hustlers were showing off their success with big fur coats and shiny Cadillacs, Archie was the complete opposite. He was quiet, always watching. He dressed perfectly, carried himself with a real sense of dignity, and had an intelligence that people honestly found a little frightening.
And here's where the legend really starts. In a business where getting caught with betting slips meant a one-way ticket to prison, Archie's greatest asset was his mind. He kept no records. There was no paper trail. Everything was stored right up here.
Just try to wrap your head around the sheer scale of this mental database. People swore he could remember a specific 10-cent bet someone made 2 years earlier. He knew every player, every number they played, how much they won, and who still owed him money. This wasn't some party trick. It was a high-stakes business tool that made him essential and saved his operation a fortune.
So Archie's world of quiet, careful calculation was about to collide head-on with a young, ambitious, and incredibly charismatic hustler who, at the time, went by the name Detroit Red. Of course, today, we know him as Malcolm X. The whole conflict that would change both of their lives forever started over this number, $600. That was the payout for a winning bet that Detroit Red claimed was his. And let me tell you, back in the 1940s, that was a massive amount of money.
So this whole thing turned into a standoff. Archie, the human computer, insisted Malcolm was trying to scam him by placing the bet late. Malcolm swore up and down he'd placed it fairly. We'll probably never know the absolute truth, but you have to understand, for a man whose entire identity, his entire power, was built on his perfect memory, this accusation was an attack on his very existence.
That feud, it was the beginning of the end for West Indian Archie. It was a crack in his reputation that came from the inside, and it was happening just as these huge forces were starting to threaten his whole world from the outside.
You can see the shift happening right here. The numbers game, which was once Harlem's own homegrown enterprise, had just become too profitable for outsiders to ignore. Organized crime syndicates started moving in, and they systematically absorbed or just crushed independent black operators like Archie. The entire game was changing.
Archie's personal, memory-based system was a work of pure genius, but it just couldn't compete with corporate-style organized crime. His downfall wasn't really a matter of violence, it was a matter of evolution. The world he had mastered, it simply stopped existing.
So why should we remember some small-time hustler whose time had passed?
Because West Indian Archie was so much more than just a character in Malcolm X's autobiography. He was a symbol of an entire era.
His story matters because he represents this incredible form of black entrepreneurship that thrived when all the other doors were slammed shut. He proved that even in the underworld, brains could be more powerful than brawn, and, whether he knew it or not, his clash with Malcolm X helped push a future leader onto the path that would change history.
Years later, Malcolm X actually went to visit an ailing Archie, and the two of them reconciled. By then, Archie was mostly a forgotten man, but he should be remembered as he was at his peak, a quiet, calculating, disciplined mind in a world of pure chaos. Just wholly unforgettable.
Which leaves us with one final thought. Archie's brilliance was undeniable, but because he operated outside the lines, he was almost completely erased from the history books. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How many other geniuses has history forgotten simply because their stories didn't fit into a neat little box?